$15 billion. That's not a typo. Donald Trump just filed a lawsuit against the New York Times demanding more money than the GDP of some small countries. But this isn't just about money. It's about a mysterious birthday note allegedly sent to Jeffrey Epstein that could change everything we know about Trump's past. And the timing? Let's just say it's no coincidence this bombshell dropped right after some very uncomfortable questions started surfacing. Trump's legal team marched into a Florida district court on Monday night with a defamation lawsuit that reads more like a love letter to himself than a legal document. The filing doesn't just accuse the Times of spreading false and defamatory content, it goes full nuclear, calling the newspaper a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party and an unapologetic purveyor of falsehoods. But here's where it gets really wild. The lawsuit describes Trump's election win as the greatest personal and political achievement in American history, and credits his success on The Apprentice to his sui generis charisma. Yes, they actually wrote that in a legal document. The papers even call his father, Fred Trump, a legendary businessman and a patriot, while claiming the Trump name is synonymous with worldwide excellence, luxury, and opulence. You can't make this stuff up. But buried beneath all this self-congratulation is the real reason Trump's going after the Times, and it all traces back to Jeffrey Epstein. The New York Times had been investigating a crude birthday note that allegedly bears Trump's signature, complete with what sources describe as a lewd drawing. Trump's been desperately denying he wrote it, but the evidence keeps piling up. He already sued the Wall Street Journal for first reporting on this note back in July, and now the Times is in his crosshairs for continuing to dig into the story. The timing is particularly damning. This note surfaced just as questions about Trump's connections to Epstein were heating up again, and we all know how those stories tend to end. This lawsuit is just the latest weapon in Trump's all-out war against the media. He's not just suing newspapers, he's trying to bankrupt them into silence. Look at the pattern. ABC News and George Stephanopoulos, hit with a lawsuit, settled for $15 million. Paramount in 60 Minutes, another lawsuit, another $16 million settlement. The Wall Street Journal, still fighting their case in court. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a coordinated campaign to use the legal system as a battering ram against any outlet that dares to report unflattering truths. And here's the kicker. It's working. Major news organizations are settling rather than fighting, essentially paying Trump to make bad stories go away. The Times articles that triggered Trump's rage weren't just random hit pieces. They were based on a devastating book called Lucky Loser by reporters Suzanne Craig and Russ Buettner. These journalists spent years digging into Trump's finances and discovered something that shattered his entire mythology. Far from being a self-made billionaire, Trump actually squandered his father's fortune and built his empire on lies and illusions. The articles detailed how he lost money on virtually every business venture, survived on daddy's bailouts, and created a fake image of success through smoke and mirrors. Trump's team is calling these pre-election articles election interference, but isn't telling voters the truth about a candidate exactly what journalism is supposed to do? The Times even endorsed Kamala Harris for president, which Trump claims was an illegal campaign contribution worth billions. Because apparently, newspapers aren't allowed to have opinions anymore. Trump took to Truth Social to unleash an unhinged rant that perfectly captures his mental state. He called the Times one of the worst and most degenerate newspapers in the history of our country, and claimed their endorsement of Harris was the single largest illegal campaign contribution ever. But he didn't stop there. He ranted about the Times lying about your favorite president, me, and went on a tangent about the America First movement and MAGA. The all-caps screaming, the paranoid accusations, the narcissistic references to himself. It's all there in one glorious meltdown. This isn't the measured response of a confident leader. It's the desperate flailing of someone who knows the walls are closing in. Here's the reality check. Trump doesn't want you to know. He's tried this before and failed spectacularly. He sued the Times over an opinion piece about Russian interference in 2016. The judge threw it out, citing First Amendment protections. He sued them again in 2018 over reporting on his tax schemes, calling it an insidious plot. Another judge tossed that case in 2023. Legal experts are already laughing at this new $15 billion lawsuit, pointing out that public figures like Trump face an incredibly high bar for proving defamation. They need to show actual malice, meaning the Times knew what they published was false, or showed reckless disregard for the truth. Good luck proving that when your own business records contradict your claims of success. The First Amendment exists specifically to protect the press from powerful people trying to silence criticism, and courts have consistently upheld these protections. So what's really going on here? This isn't about defamation or protecting his reputation. It's about intimidation, pure and simple. Trump knows he probably won't win $15 billion, but that's not the point. The point is to make it so expensive and exhausted, to report on him that news organizations think twice before publishing their next investigation. It's about sending a message. Cross me, and I'll bury you in legal bills. But here's the thing. The New York Times isn't backing down. They've already announced they'll continue reporting without fear or favor and will defend journalists' First Amendment rights. This lawsuit might actually backfire spectacularly, drawing even more attention to the very stories Trump wants buried. Because nothing makes people more curious about a secret than watching someone spend $15 billion trying to keep it hidden. The Jeffrey Epstein note, the squandered fortune, the fake success story. It's all about to get a lot more attention than it ever would have without this lawsuit. And somewhere in a newsroom in New York, investigative journalists are probably already digging deeper, knowing that where there's this much smoke, there's definitely fire.